Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the Vince Staples Discography Review. Vince, for those who are not aware, is a California rapper who takes that West Coast influence and uses it as the backdrop for his very deadpan, straight shooter style that's laced with really good wordplay and choice punchline delivery that I think excels Vince above some of his contemporaries that may try to channel that same shtick. While I got into him through his Odd Future features early on in that group's career, I didn't fully get into his records until a little bit later on down the road, but I've absolutely loved to see the evolution he's taken as an artist because he's released some, not only growers, but some incredible immediate favorites for me personally for how he fuses sounds together and for how he further pushes his growth and improves his ability to create an album-like experience. He's got 10 releases that I'm going to be ranking from least to most favorite today in this video and giving you sort of a proverbial roadmap to getting into Vince if you've never listened to a full-length record of his before. But he's also got 2 EPs that I'm going to talk about first right now.
6,500 degrees. About 6,500 degrees.
Now, considering how Vince has sort of played with the ideas of what really makes an album, I could see people including EPs like Hell Can Wait and Prima Donna in his proverbial album ranking, but the difference is that these 2 releases don't feel like fully realized concepts. They feel like a proof of concept. They feel like a sort of creative burst without any real focus. And that's not to say that they're lesser because of that. I honestly like these 2 EPs more than some of the lows in Vince's discography. I think Hell Can Wait really takes the more low-end banger-centric side that some of Summertime '06 really plays with and ramps that up and really focuses on that to create this little pocket of some high-energy heat that I think Vince uses to captivate so very well. I think the opening 2-piece of Fire and 6500 welcomes the world into this Doors of Hell's Gate sort of heat very well. I also think that the accessibility of tracks like 6500 and the flip of Put Your Hands Up on Hands Up is a great sort of flip that sort of teases some of the creative, sort of fun wordplay that Vince is capable of. While Limos and Feeling the Love kind of help smooth out this little project and give it a nice little rounding out to make it feel like a little bit more than just a one-note little release. And I like this. I think it's a good sort of teaser for things to come. I feel like if you like Summertime '06 and you haven't spun Hell Can Wait, you really should. It's a good sort of like extension, or at least precursor in the instance of when this was released, to the energy that era was championing. And I think that it's just a solid little batch of tracks that doesn't really have a whole lot in the vein of true all-career highlights, but it's a solid little nugget nonetheless.
Is it real? Is it real? Is it real?
Now, out of the 2 EPs he does have, I do think Prima Donna I like a sizable amount less, if only because out of the slim pickings that are here, there's less here that I really walk away from loving. But I do think it is an interesting sort of middle point between Summertime and Big Fish Theory, the album that it sits between. Because tracks like Prima Donna and Pimp Hand and Smile to a degree, given its, spins on like a rock riff and the beat, feel like expansions on Summertime, whereas War Ready, Loco, and Big Time feel more like him dancing more, infusing those West Coast ideas with electronic dance music, especially War Ready with that like use of the Andre sample to carry the beat. But like Loco also has a beat that just really can get the listener going. I mostly like it less because I think that like it's that sort of awkward transition that would give way to a classic after that. But I feel like out of Vince projects, I feel like this is the most of like a cherry-picking experience. I really love the title track, and I think that War Ready is a really good song. And I like Big Time as well. I think it's a nice way to sort of like just kind of end things on a nice, solid note. But I will say that this is the project of his I spin in full, maybe the least out of the ones that I've had in my rotation, outside of maybe one particular album. But as far as the EPs go, this is definitely my least favorite of the two. And those are my thoughts on the EPs. Let's go ahead and get started ranking on the albums right now.
Niggas safe, only gave him prison dates and churches, chicken dinner plates. Columbus is beloved when the fuck on Malcolm.
The equivalent of like a rough starter demo for a lot of bands is the early career mixtape for a rapper. And Shine Gold Chain is maybe the epitome of showcasing an artist who has potential and will grow to great things, starting off with some real humble beginnings. It's got lo-fi, still very West Coast inspired production. That synth on Beeper King exclusive is like quintessential West, along with the pianos that code a lot of this project. It's got that lo-fi twist, but it still leans West forward. And Vince's delivery is a lot less deadpan. He's actually got a little more energy on here than I feel like he does at some of his career highs. My problem with this lies in him leaning into some of that cringy edgelord shit that he was sort of like, that sort of feels like obvious considering he was coming up with the Odd Future dudes. But like a lot of the stuff in the back half, like Hostile and the like, just aren't indicative of like what I think are showcasing Vince's talents and are written with this like very adolescent, just cringy mindset that I think is indicative of a young artist coming up, but I also think is a point that I don't think many people really need to get to with Vince's discography. It's interesting to see him work with artists like Mike G and Kilo Kish early on in his career, like through this, but I think that, again, he's worked with those guys better. I think he's worked on better production. I think all in all, he's just done better work, and I think that projects like Shine Gold Chain are ones that absolutely can be left in the past. And I think that as far as like what's creatively on display here, it doesn't really showcase where Vince had evolved, even if it's got very West Coast forward ideas from a production standpoint. He's just done a better job at emboldening the heights of West production with some verses that are a lot more well put together. You know, I think the closest he maybe comes to really embodying where he really takes his ideas, especially early on, it's with tracks like Trigger with a Heart or even Versace Rap. They have that type of delivery, and the production sort of leans into that in a way that sort of enhances it. But even those, small experiences, but even those small nuggets, I don't think make this project worthwhile to spin.
She said, just pray to sweet Lord Jesus, but he can't do shit when you be.
Now, the case of Winter in Prague is a little bit different than Shine Gold Chain. While also very early on in Vince's career, it honestly feels more indicative of where his career would end up and not where it initially got started in the major label circle, because it's got this harnessing of mood and dreariness that I just don't think he was really captivating in his first couple of records, and I honestly really appreciate really appreciate that about it. I just don't think Michael Uzowaru's production is the best production Vince has hopped on. In fact, some of the best moments are allocated to interlude fodder, like Sermon. I think the organ sound of that sample really set a stage, but I don't think it gives way to anything interesting on Twitch. Twitch feels like the remnants of what like his early era really sounded like, while tracks like Lord and Water Park, I feel like more evoke the mood of his most recent releases, especially for how just very dreary it all sounds. It evokes that sort of winter atmosphere that Winter in Prague, the title, sort of embodies. I just don't think as a collective experience it's as cohesive as his records above this are, and I feel like if you're a fan of some of his newer stuff and you like the sort of mood that has and you want to hear some of that tapped into in like a primal sort of raw sense, you could listen to Winter in Prague and maybe find a couple tracks that you enjoy from it. But I think that it's a melting pot of mood that doesn't wholly always portray that mood consistently, or at least do so in a cohesive manner. This whole era I hadn't really spun until doing this review, and there won't be anything that I really spin after this, because while there are some solid ideas from a production standpoint, I think Vince's rapping has just improved tenfold from this point, and I feel like outside of maybe liking the mood of this, a lot of this era isn't really worth your time, in my opinion.
Never wish for better days, only wish the nigga would. Never been the pump faker, that won't do your boy no good. Still.
Shine Gold Chain 2 is the first release in this proverbial ranking that I think from a full-length perspective, I could see people still fucking with now. I think similarly to Hell Can Wait, the production sort of feels like warm up to some of the ideas he would explore more on Summertime '06, but a little bit lesser. It's got that mixtape feel, but I think a lot of the sounds on here still hold up, by and large, more than anything I've talked about thus far. I mean, I think Locked and Loaded and Oh You Scared honestly could have been tracks on Summertime '06, because I think they do a good job at juxtaposing street life to, like, your life within it. While tracks like Humble and Nate and Turn and Shots further flesh out those ideas and keep it real West Coast. You know, I think that as far as, like, embodying Vince's MO from an artistic perspective, Shine Gold Chain is at least a good point where some of those ideas really start to take shape in a way that you could still kind of see more so in the sounds he was toying with during this era. I think this is a solid-ass project. Again, nothing on here I think is as memorable as stuff that I put above it, but I think that as far as being like an alright, pretty well put together hip-hop project, this is one of those. And I feel like if you like West Coast hip-hop, if you like Vince, and you want to hear him a little bit less high concept, and honestly, with a little more energy behind him than he would sort of grow out to do, especially on his last couple of releases, this is the place to go. It's very mid-2010s with its production ideas, but I think as far as taking those and creating a still very personal-driven project out of that, you can't go wrong with Shine Gold Chain 2.
I don't fear no man, only I got the upper hand. Lost too many friends, till it down the streets I can't pretend.
There isn't an album I think I've spun more with it at a 6 out of 10, trying to like it more, than maybe Vince Staples' 2021 self-titled album. This album, in hindsight, feels like maybe the most important slice of his discography too, which makes it all the more frustrating because it reintroduces the more melancholic forward ideas that he was toying with very early on in his career and having success with it in small waves, while also being an emotional pivot point for him to sort of ground himself in ways that he wasn't really doing on his last couple of releases that would sort of be fleshed out more on the ensuing records after this. It's just a record that I don't find myself loving the whole package of, because I think that it holds itself back. I like Kenny Beats' production, and I think that he's got some solid beats on here. I think that Sundowntown's beat is honestly really fucking strong, and I think that its minimalism helps let Vince's verses about discrimination ring harder. I think that the melancholic edge on the beats helps accent the reality Vince is living in as well, like on The Shining and Lil Fade. I just also think that this record gets a bit samey in some of its instrumental sounds, and I think that its briefness is maybe its biggest hindrance, because I like the sonic palette of this, and I think that Kenny Beats has done better whole album production for other artists. This is just an example of him maybe helping plant some seeds without necessarily giving them as much life as at least I would have hoped. This album feels like it ends before it's really getting started, and that's also something that I just think really sets it back. It kind of sits in this meddling realm with little in the worlds of building the listener up and taking them on a journey, and this is probably the one short release that Vince has done that I feel like could easily be placed in like the EP category. But as it stands as a full-length release, clearly it's not his worst, but it's maybe my least favorite out of his studio releases. I feel like if you enjoy where he's gone on his last couple of releases and you missed this self-titled album, you should still give it a spin. Or if you've liked his 2010 stuff and haven't given his 2020 stuff much of a spin, I would give this a spin. He's just built upon this better in such a short period of time. And while I would love to see him and Kenny work together again, I hope that it's on a more fruitful project than this.
You thirsty, please grab Sprite. My crib's lurking, don't die tonight. I just wanna dance with you.
As wild as it may seem, this point in the ranking was the biggest deliberating point, and honestly, the reason why I've been okay with pushing this video back, because I've been spinning this record and the record that I'm putting above it in the ranking a lot. And I think that I've just really grown more of a fan of Ramona Park Broke My Heart than I was when it released. I love Summertime '06, though. I think that it is a really strong start for Vince. I think that as far as capturing his youth and his sort of look back on it and how it sort of lends to his delivery style, create this portrait that I think is very well painted. You know, while it may not be a cohesive double album, it is more just kind of a package of two different things Vince was cooking as like two dishes, so to speak. They don't necessarily pair together in a deep sense, but they do share themes. The theme of youth being sort of reshaped via being changed via, you know, diving into gang culture and being, you know, wrapped up in that aspect of your life that had already been sort of in the background. It highlights the highs and lows across both discs, though, and I think very much creates a double album-like experience. That I think the only thing that's ever set it down, and I guess set it below, a record that I once thought was just alright, is the production. I really like the production on here, and I think that as far as being very in tune with the times, so to speak, I think it does so masterfully. That low end on tracks like Lift Me Up, or on Dope Man, or even on Let Me Know, even if it doesn't necessarily sound like what I think Vince does more on tracks like North North when it comes to like adapting the love of his area into his music. But like Let Me Know very much also feels like a 2015 ass beat. I think that as far as choosing production that fits the summer, there's also some choice moments like Senorita. That song is a fucking banger, and it's also just hot as hell. Or even tapping into just like a very energetic beat with a nice summer backdrop like on Surf, which I think is one of my favorite sort of mellower moments that he'd done during this era. There's some lines on the song, especially when talking about the sort of paranoia in the dark, I think creates this really nice juxtaposition on the minimal beat that song has. You know, the stretch from Get Paid through Hang and Bang is just banger after banger after banger, with some, again, choice instrumentals, but I think what I love about the album I'm about to talk about is more the sound than the sound on this. I think that as far as being an album that holds up, I'll never do like a 10 years later for this, because hey, that's now. I think that he's just improved upon this. And even on records like Vince Staples, I think the production on that record might be better than the production on here. There's some great hook spinning on this nonetheless, and I think that if you're getting into Vince Staples, this might be the best starting point, if only because, one, this is sort of an era he reflects on in pockets a lot. It's just really laid out in this nice mission statement on here, with some still choice production, some great bar spinning by Vince, and he found a way to sound both dead and hungry at the same time, and I absolutely love it.
Feeling like I'm floating to the ceiling, is it magic? Baby, tell me why you disappearing, is it magic? I will never...
This album just sounds so fucking clean. Fun backstory, when I was shopping the other day, I specifically was looking for Dark Times. We went to fucking Barnes & Noble, and they had it there. They also had a couple other Vince Staples albums, and one of them was this album. However, I, at the time, easily passed on the other two albums. They weren't even on my, like, initial pull of stuff to cull through. I kind of want to go back and buy this, though, because this album sounds super clean, and I, like, really appreciated that at the time. I gave it a 7, and I still stand by that, but re-spinning it for this review, I just really loved the production on here a lot more than I did at the time. And not to say that I hated it, I loved the Mustard stuff, and honestly, walking away from this and seeing where his production has gone, especially over the last year, I would love to see a Vince Mustard collab album. Because, like, Vince has done projects with soul producers before. You'll see one that I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. But I think that he and Mustard would pair incredibly together. And I mean, Magic and Bang That are indicative of that. They're, like, some of my favorite songs on the album, and I'd put them up there for, like, maybe some of my favorite Vince songs of all time. But the other aspect of this album that I've really loved outside of the clean production is how the hook forward writing that Vince has done in the past just really shines on here more than I may have appreciated upon first, evaluating this for the channel. Like, Lemonade is a fucking smash, and a really good collab with Ty Dolla $ign. And DJ Quick is a really loving sort of slice of sort of old school Vince at this point, but with the clean production that helps sort of lend a cleanness to the sort of look back and nostalgia. There's just a really nice culmination of ideas here that I did like at the time, but I definitely enjoy more now a couple years down the road. While not necessarily narratively focused, a lot of the interludes and stuff do lend to the themes that Vince does rap about on here. The leanness, I would also say, sort of sets it above Summertime '06. Not to say that Summertime '06 is a bloated album, but I think the slimness of this just creates a really nice listen as well. While not every song on here is my favorite, I do think that the hit ratio on this is strong enough, and I think that it is still a really solid slice of his discography that I think if you haven't reevaluated, you absolutely should do so. I think that it is a solid stepping stone, given it sort of bridges some of the energies of Dark Times and is self-titled, but cleans up some of the atmosphere that Kenny Beats sort of planted on that self-titled, which itself was sort of a refining of some of the Winter Prog stuff. I like this album a lot. I think that it is pretty damn good.
I had $100 for every dream that I ever had. I barely have enough to right the wrongs I didn't.
There is some magical shit throughout Stolen Youth. Mac's brand of production that he did under the Larry Fisherman sort of pseudonym suited that character's dark personality, and I think that, like, while I'm shocked the lyrics don't dive into that, considering Vince's past with, like, OF and stuff, I do think that he does use the sort of sinister edge that Mac's production does have to go into some dark and really morbid territories that show some really real problems in the world. Also keep it grounded in the world that Vince had been really building off of and looking back on at the time. Phantoms takes this really dark synth lead and creates a banger out of it. Guns N' Roses is this just really dark series of stories about women getting kidnapped. Killin' Y'all has Vince and Ab-Soul just going off, and Schoolboy Q even comes in to further cement that reality on Back Sellin' Crack. Both Mac appearances on Heaven and the posse cut that closes it out, Sleep, are choice as hell too. I think the beat of Sleep is fucking hard. And I think that, like, as far as creating this nice, just concise, but fucking well done tape, Stolen Youth is one that I think absolutely knocks it out of the park. While kind of feeling that this sort of tangent in his discography to some degree in the context of everything else I've talked about, it is absolutely a place that I think you should go to. I think that if you have liked Mac Miller's production in the past, you like his style, I think he weaves well with Vince, and I think that you would enjoy this. It's one of those records I kind of wish were on DSP so that more people were aware of it, but I think that if you haven't spun Stolen Youth, it's absolutely worth your time if you want, like, early Vince channeled in better than everything he'd done in that era. It's this, like, wild pre-debut anomaly that I think is easily the best of that era.
I'm in that 745. Hope I can come scoop you up around 745.
Big Fish Theory was my intro to Vince's discography. It was actually a recommendation for the listening log, kind of. It was an album that Kalen, longtime friend of the channel, threw at me. They told me to listen to it, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It was an honorable mention for my albums of the year list that year, but, like, honestly, it should have ended up on there. I think I retroactively put it on there, but, like, this album has done nothing but grow on me. I think that Vince's style fuses incredibly well with electronic production. I think that, like, some of the songs are, like, amongst some of my favorite instrumentally in his career. I think Crabs in a Bucket is a fantastic opener. Obviously, I've talked about Yeah Right on the Kendrick features video. I love Sophie's production on that. I think it's fan-fucking-tastic. And, like, Love Can Be is another really strong one, but I love the way that also that West Coast banger style still shines, like on the title track or on 745. 745 is an absolute smash. And I think as far as, like, being one of Vince's catchier songs, it is also amongst one of my favorites. I think in the sort of writing a hook for an electronic song, I think Homage is also a great showcasing of that. There's just a really good showcasing of Vince's style and like potential as a songwriter on here that I absolutely love the more that I spin it as the years have gone on. I think that it's like just a fantastic release that sort of really showcases that Vince is sort of a very creative forward artist and has some really cool ideas that he wants to pull together, and when given the opportunity, he will absolutely do so. There's a lot of great features on here. This is a really good collaborative pot on this album that I think is fucking choice, and I think that if you aren't starting with like Summertime '06, maybe start with this. It's a more eloquent showcasing of where his creativity will take him in ways that I think are teased a little bit on Summertime '06, but I think that album is sort of wrapped up in a lot of other stuff that like that can sort of get lost, and whereas this is like just a really focused, concise, well-constructed experience. And I'm not just saying that because it was my starting point. I think it is a pretty solid starting point.
One time circling the block. Little buddy got murdered on the flat. 2 times, you know how we rock. You know.
That being said, FM is a classic. I saw Mark from Spectrum Pulse say that like the 5-year gap is over. We can call this album a classic, and I absolutely agree. I think that as far as creating a well-constructed, concise, but like airtight pocket project, FM is absolutely an example of that. It opens and closes with 2 just song of the summer, infectious bangers, and has this really fun radio show in between that has some fun features like E40 coming in as a nice surprise because he's not even on the feature list, and Earl and Tyga getting some fun little wild interludes in there. It's all indicative in service of this concept, and I think that that concept just excels. I also think that like that radio side lends to some of the storytelling that happens on tracks like Don't Get Chopped and Outside, and even Run the Bands, even if that's another like banger-centric song. This is a really strong album. And I think that, again, if you want a good place to, if you want a nice, concise Vince project, given it's very West Coast forward, this is also a really good one, honestly. I don't think it's necessarily as like production-wise as ambitious as maybe a Big Fish Theory, but maybe that's to service how strong Vince goes when he keeps it West. That's one of the things I really liked about Ramona Park Broke My Heart. It's just done better here. I think that it's a fantastic release. Similarly to that, it's like an on-site. If I see FM in the wild next time, I'm going to try and grab that, because I love that record. I think it's so good. I know at the time I complained about its length, but young me was stupid, alright? This album is a lot of fun. And I think that that's what's important, okay?
Right around South Pasadena on the 10 speed. I still got blick. And I still get tricky.
All that being said, that whole album's sort of greater meaning of like missing the radio is wrapped up in the song Radio on Dark Times. And that song is fucking incredible. Vince was just on something special when he was making this thing, man. You guys, it's recency also. I've talked about this recently. I spun this the day after I bought this because while I also got Untitled and mastered at the time, I had to hear what this sounded like on my system. The production on here is so focused. It's not very busy. It's not really trying to do like a broad strokes of things, but what it does so very well. All of the production, the drum stuff on Black and Blue, and Government Cheese, and obviously Little Homies. Life Hard But I Go Harder is still just the mantra I'm using as I punch the brick wall of life day by day, man. I think that as far as creating this record that really sits in the darker corners of your mind and the realizations made within yourself amidst that darkness, but still in some choice instances trying to find a light through, is some magical shit. Vince did it. He made his best album in his career with Dark Times. It's fantastic. Absolutely my favorite Vince Staples album. And go spin Vince Staples. What do you think of Vince Staples' discography? Did you like my ranking of it. Did you not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you'd like to, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. Tomorrow comes the end of Pajama Sam with Rachel. Hopefully you're excited for that. But I'm going to go. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, situations, and I'll see you another day.